Polybius was born around the year 203 and died around 120 BC. He descended from the Achaean city of Megalopolis. He was an ancient Greek historian under Roman influence. After defeating the Macedonian Empire, which contained a large number of Greek territories, the Romans took Macedonian and Greek children with them as hostages in Rome. One of them was Polybius, who stayed in Rome for 17 years. As an educated and intelligent boy, Polybius was brought to live in the home of Aemilius Paulus himself, a Roman general who defeated Macedonia, where he was raised together with his children. In 150 BC, he was allowed to go back home, but he refused, and together with Aemilius Paulus' son, went to North Africa, where he witnessed the destruction of Carthage by the Romans. After that, he went to Spain, and then returned to Achaia, where, thanks to his connections with the Romans, made better living conditions for the Greeks. He wrote several books, but many of them were lost. His partially preserved work is the book Histories, in which the period from 220 until 146 BC is described in great detail. Further on, we will see extracts from this work only covering the subject we're focusing on. It is well known that in the 3rd century BC, an Achaean League was formed. It was an alliance between the cities from the present-day Greece's territories, especially Peloponnesus. In that time, Greek territories were occupied by the Macedonians. The leader of the Achaean League was Aretas, who first fought against the Macedonian slavery, and later, after he was about to be replaced as leader to the Achaean League by the Spartan Cleomenes, he called his former enemies, the Macedonians, to help him. But, after they returned to Peloponnesus and helped him, the Macedonians did not retreat, but stayed there. This is why Aretas was criticized by a significant part of the Greek public. These events are described by Polybius. For the early activities of Aretas against the Macedonians when he was fighting to push off Peloponnesus, Polybius writes,
He continued to govern the Achaean nation, all his schemes and action being directed to one object, the expulsion of the Macedonians from the Peloponnesus, the suppression of the tyrants, and the re-establishment on a sure basis of the ancient freedom of every state.
Of course, when he says every state, Polybius means the Greek cities which were mainly occupied by the Macedonians. This extract clearly separates the Achaeans and the Macedonians as two separate nations, meaning ethnically. About the ambitions Cleomenes of Sparta had for leading the Achaean League to liberate the Greeks from the Macedonian slavery, Polybius writes,
Cleomenes' personal ambition and far-reaching projects, though for the present he aimed only at supremacy in the Peloponnese, would on his attaining this at once develop into a claim to be overlord of all Hellas, a thing impossible without his first putting an end to the dominion of Macedon.
This too is so clearly written that no further explanations are needed. The Spartan Cleomenes wanted to take over the leadership of the Achaean League so he can rule Peloponnesus, and then with all Hellas. But this was impossible because those territories were under Macedonian slavery. Meaning, he would first have to free the Greeks from the Macedonian slavery, and then rule all Hellas. It is clear that Polybius under all Hellas did not consider Macedonia at all. On the contrary, it is clearly said that in order to rule all Hellas, he would first have to free them from Macedonia. Further on, Polybius, in order to explain some conditions of the later period, he returns to Macedonia's older history, mentioning Philip II and Alexander the Great of Macedon. Here too he clearly separates the Macedonians from the Greeks.
Philip perceived and reckoned on the cowardice and indolence of the Persians as compared with the military efficiency of himself and his Macedonians, and further fixing his eyes on the splendor of the great prize which the war promised, he lost no time, once he had secured the avowed goodwill of the Greeks, but seizing on the pretext that it was his urgent duty to take vengeance on the Persians for their injurious treatment of the Greeks, he bestirred himself and decided to go to war, beginning to make every preparation for this purpose.
We can see that here too Polybius mentioned the Macedonians and the Greeks as two separate nations. Polybius writes about the war contract Philip V of Macedon made with Hannibal of Carthage, which allied them against the dangers of the Romans. One article from this contract says,
King Philip and the Macedonians, and such of the Greeks as are the allies, shall be protected and guarded by the Carthaginians.
There is no doubt that the Macedonians are treated as a nation separate to the Greeks in here as well. It is known that at the time, not all Greeks were under Macedonian slavery, but a large number were. The article in this contract clearly mentions the Macedonians and the Greeks, who were their armies, etc., and who were under their reign.